Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff. I'm a SME and also a coach who works with people in the construction industry.
Hey everyone, I'm Rochelle. I'm a proposal management consultant in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry.
And this
is Burnout Banter. If you've ever struggled to say no at work, you are not alone. Saying no can be challenging because of social and cultural conditioning that values compliance, agreeability, and a desire to please others. Fear of rejection, disapproval, or conflict can also play a role in this. Additionally, saying yes to requests can give us a sense of validation or importance, while declining can feel like a loss of opportunity or control. It takes practice to overcome these obstacles and feel comfortable saying no, but it also helps to know the right way to say no. Hi, everybody. My name is Rochelle.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is Burnout Banter. Today, we're joined by Jen McGovern, CPSM. Jen is a senior regional marketing manager for VHB, an 1,800-person engineering, planning, environmental, and technology consulting firm. With a background as an editor, Jen fell into the AEC industry in 2012 and found a passion for proposals and infrastructure projects. A prolific author and presenter, Jen is a past president of SMPS Washington, D.C., and was named the 2022 SMPS Chapter President of the Year. She also serves on SMPS's National Editorial Committee and Certification Committee. She achieved her Certified Professional Services Marketer, CPSM, credential in 2015. Jen is here to help us all learn how to say one of the most difficult words in the workplace: no. Before we jump into today's episode, remember to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen so that you can stay up to date with the latest banter. So, Jen, we are super excited to have you here. Jeff and I were at your CERC presentation in Wilmington this year, and we immediately, as soon as it was done, looked at each other and were like, we have to get her on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
We wanted to start with, what is your experience with burnout? Have you burnt out, or have you, as a manager, seen your team burn out? What does that look like for you personally?
Yeah, I think in the AEC industry, it's pretty hard not to see burnout, both in marketing and technical staff. I mean, we're all just kind of going all the time. And for me personally, it kind of snuck up on me. I joined VHB back in 2015 to take on this regional marketing manager role. And the team was, I will politely say, very undersized for the task at hand. I inherited 2.5 people at the time, and now we're up to 15, which I feel is appropriate for what we need to do. So definitely grown a lot over the last 8 years. But one of the problems I kind of put upon myself at the beginning was taking on a full proposal manager workload in addition to managing the team, setting up and establishing processes, and doing all of the manager type work. And it was because I wanted to show the value of what marketing could do, right? Show that strategic partnership that we can bring to the table. But what kind of ended up happening was me just getting progressively more burnt out, since I was essentially working 2 full-time jobs. And I didn't realize it until I had the opportunity to be sent to an internal leadership training that we do up at our headquarters. And as part of that, there is a 360-degree review done of each person. So that's where your direct reports weigh in on how you're doing, your peers, colleagues above you in the org chart. And so for marketing, that's always an interesting experience, because there's a lot of people kind of in our orbit who might not directly be in our reporting chain. So a lot of managing directors and senior principals at our firm kind of weighed in. And the feedback was such a mix. Like, my direct reports were like, Jenna's a rock star. I don't know how she gets it all done. She is a champion of the world. And those peers with those technical staff weighing in were like, Jen is really hard to work with. Jen is capable of doing great things, but she's starting to fray around the edges, is one of them that stuck out in my mind. And
They said that?
Yes, that was the exact quote. It stuck in my brain. Here we are, like 4 years later. I have survived the burnout, everyone. But it kind of was like, I felt like a shot to the heart, right? Like I burst into tears, which I'm from Jersey. I'm not a crier. That's not a thing that I do. And so for me, it was just so overwhelming that the burnout was obvious to everyone. And yet no one was asking how they could help. No one was coming to me and saying, how can I take things off your plate? what can we do so that you're not fraying at the edges and you're not this impossible superwoman doing all of the things. And so I'd say my lesson from it is just to recognize that your company will take whatever you give, right? They're happy when you go above and beyond, but they will keep taking it. And so you've got to be the one to notice when you've gone above and beyond for too long. You've got to be that one who spots that sign of burnout and starts to set your own boundaries or talk to your supervisor. And so for me, that really helped me talk to my boss more about like, okay, I need a better staffing plan. Like hiring one person a year is not going to do it for what we need to accomplish as a region. And, and like I said, now we're at 15, like things changed. And the job I had been doing is now done by 3 separate full-time people. So like definitely needed it to be more than one person's job. But, I'm lucky that I had a supportive boss, and VHB is supportive of marketing in general. So we were able to invest in those hires and get me to a place where I'm still here. I'm still happy to be doing my job, but I'm a lot happier with the things I am doing because I'm not doing all of the things, right? So
right. Oh my gosh, that's wild. And I have so many thoughts. But like the nobody's coming to save you one really sticks out to me. Like people saw you fraying. That hurts me so much that people saw you falling apart and they were just like, well, she'll deal with it, or she won't, and we'll just keep telling her that she's not dealing with it. That's wild.
Yeah. And I love that it was through an anonymous survey, right? Like it wasn't saying to me, like, I'm concerned that I see this happening. It was, I shall type this into a computer, enjoy reading it in the printout later in the year, Jen.
Well, I wonder how many of them, is that a reflection of how they're feeling too, right?
Right.
Like part of that that's showing up in their life. And so maybe they're hypersensitive to seeing it in you, but because they're dealing with it, they don't know what to do about it either.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. If 80% of our workforce is burnt out, it's very likely that they were also burnt out, and they can't help you if they can't help themselves. But man.
Yeah, the other thing I heard is that the company will take as much as you're willing to give, right? People in our lives will do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it
doesn't just happen at work, it happens outside of work too.
Exactly. Everyone will, because they kind of rely on you to say, okay, that's my max. I can't do anything more. I can't give any more. And we feel less comfortable saying that. I think it's interesting, like looking at how the pandemic has changed things, right? I feel like people are more comfortable blending that boundary between work and life and saying like, whoa, I cannot take on this next project because I've got X, Y, and Z coming up, or I cannot go to that baseball game because I've got X, Y, and Z coming up. Like it kind of has helped people speak up more clearly about the boundaries, but we're still in a learning place with people feeling comfortable vocalizing them.
Yeah, one thing I heard earlier this week, I was listening to something and they were talking about how, even somebody we know really well, we probably only know maybe 15 to 20% of what's going on in their head. Yeah. So it is really hard to know, right, when somebody's taken on too much, because if they don't tell us, we don't know most of what they're doing.
Yeah. I've had coworkers who are like, Rochelle, you just handle stress so well. We had no idea. Like, meanwhile, I'm over here like a puddle on the inside, like I can't do this anymore. Right. That probably should have been my wake up moment when they were like, you do this so well. Like, no one can tell. No one can tell that I've hit my limit. And I'm just like 2 seconds away, one more assignment away from snapping. But that's like you said, that's why we practice, we figure out how to push these boundaries, which I think loops us really well to this concept of like, why is it so hard for us to set boundaries? And why is it so hard for us to say no at work or even in our, personal lives?
I think there's so many reasons. And one of them is, a lot of us naturally want to help. We're social creatures as humans, right? We want to help each other. We're not like, well, I look forward to seeing you suffer later, so I'm just going to say no and wander off. Like, we just want to help. We want to be a team player. Especially for marketers, we want to show our values to the firm, right? So you want to be able to say yes, especially in the workplace. Or it could be the kind of thing where your manager asks you to do it. Like, even if they try to, with my team, I always try to present it as like, here's an opportunity to work on a proposal. Does that feel like of interest? Do you feel like you have time? But I don't know if they comfortably feel like they could say, no, I don't want to take that on, or no, I don't have time to do that. And some of it is there's unclear priorities, or you're just not sure when you can say no? Like, is your manager keeping a track in their head of like, well, you said no to the last 3 assignments. Do you really want this job? Kind of thinking about like that. Or it can be the mentality of maybe your team's understaffed like mine had been. And so then you start thinking, if I don't do it, who will? Like, it needs to get done. So if I say no, what's going to happen to it? Who does it then get pushed on top of? And that goes back to the whole, we want to help. We don't want to burn it others, right? So feeling like saying no or setting and enforcing a boundary can just feel very tricky, like you're setting yourself apart because everyone else seems to be saying yes. I think, like you said, like we don't know what's going on in other people's heads and they all seem to be saying yes to every assignment. So why am I the one saying no?
Yeah, we had an audience member. We presented at Southwest Regional after CERC, and one of our audience members said exactly what you just said. She was the manager, and she was like, well, I'm putting in 12 to 14 hours a day so that my team doesn't have to. And if I don't do it, then who's going to do it? And my thought was like, that's crazy. You are definitely understaffed and need to hire. But also, like, could you have spread that out? I don't know how big her team was, but like, could you have spread that out so like everybody's just working like an extra half hour or an hour instead of an extra 4 to 6 hours a day and burning you out? Like, can you ask for help? It was just really interesting to me that it was in her mind, it was her and her alone. She had to be the one that shouldered that burden to protect her team, which I appreciated, but also just, oof.
Yeah.
And you said the same thing. You took on 2 roles earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty common. I have a client who does that as well, right? To protect the team, she takes on more.
Yeah. And some of it is, as a manager, you sometimes want to protect your team from the experience you had. Like if you came from a place where you were buried or not respected, or, you want to kind of create an environment where it's like, well, I'll save you. You only have to work 8 hours a day, hopefully most days, asterisk, and I'll just be here in the morning and at night and be running around. And you think you're doing the right thing, but at the end of the day, for me personally, when I would take on that much stuff, it meant I wasn't interacting with my team. They weren't learning from my leadership. My QC of their proposals was stuff I was doing at night and emailing to them. So it was never a discussion of like, well, here's how you could strengthen it and make it better next time. And there was just this perception that I was always too busy to reach out to, right? So like you end up creating bigger problems in a way by trying to protect the team. You're not helping the team as much as you think you are.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, we can say one thing, and as parents, this goes too, right? We say something, they're not paying attention to what we say, they're paying attention to what we do. Right. And so even if you're trying to protect them, they're still seeing, oh, well, this is what I need to do to get ahead because this is what my boss is doing, and it sets a really dangerous precedent. And I love the idea of we're a team. If everybody works a little bit more, then that saves all of us.
Well, and I think that if you're being that manager who's constantly saying yes to taking on the things that you don't want your team to have to take on, you're perpetuating that. Jen is Superwoman, so I should be like Jen. I can say yes too, and then you're creating this culture of yes. Which is the opposite of what you intended because you're trying to protect them, but they're seeing you say yes. And so they're like, we need to do that too. I've had that experience with a manager who I thought was just absolutely Superwoman, didn't know how she did it. She was like constantly getting twice the work that I was getting done. And it looked like she was doing it in work hours. And I started to realize like her computer was always gone. Like you're working at home constantly. But she was constantly saying yes and probably trying to protect me a little bit. But it made me think I had to do the same thing. So kind of you're trying to do the right thing and you're just maybe causing more problems. But Jen, you have a really interesting history with the word no and saying it wrong. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So like I said, like part of the driver for me wanting to become a manager is exactly that protection mentality. At my firm prior to VHB, I was really seeing that, both at that firm and then just with interacting with people across SMPS, that there was this feeling across the whole industry that marketers were, I don't know how to say it, bottom of the food chain, not really protected by processes. And then marketers were getting burnt out. I had read in an SMPS publication that the average tenure of a marketer was 2 years. And for me, that was so frustrating to hear because honestly, it takes a year to get up to speed on your firm's projects and people and systems and processes. So then you were getting maybe a good year of work out of somebody before they were like, I'm never doing this again. See you around. And you're back from the beginning. So I really wanted to become a manager so I could create the type of organization that I would have wanted worked in terms of having a balanced workload, having marketing's contributions being valued. And, you know, at BHB, I was lucky enough that they took a chance on bringing me on board and kind of understood the vision of where I was going. And right off the bat, I was trying to change processes. I was trying to set up the system so that marketing could provide valued contributions rather than kind of the coordination aspect of it. Like there is a big difference between putting together pieces of a proposal and guiding a proposal strategy. Those are two very different things. And I wanted more of that higher level work, but it requires more time, more thought. You know, like anyone can compile a PDF. Well, anyone who knows how to use Acrobat can compile a PDF, and you can do that pretty quickly. But coming up with the plan for how it should go together, what the story should be, that takes a lot more time. And so here I am, like working really hard, thinking I'm making positive change for the organization. And my boss called me in about a year or so after I started, and she said, we need to talk. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, like, I'm like, everything's going great. Look at me doing all of the things. And she said she'd been talking with the other members of the leadership team, and pretty much across the board, everyone found me negative, inflexible, and hard to work with. And I was like, oh, all right, that's not how I thought things were going. So thank you for bringing this to my attention, but also this is horrific. And of course, like I call my parents after and I'm like, Ma, I got this feedback. Did you hear it? And she goes, oh, you've been letting them get to know the real you? And I was like, wow. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
But that said, like, it's true. I'm stubborn. I can be inflexible. I am a little bit my way or the highway, but I hadn't realized that personality trait in my personal life was sneaking over into my work life. And it turned out that a lot of the decisions I was making that would improve our hit rate and return on investment, the decisions I was making to streamline processes, the decisions I was making to reduce that marketing turnover, those were the things that were frustrating my colleagues because all they were hearing was no. The issue wasn't that I was saying no, it's that they weren't understanding why I was saying no or why their request was no longer appropriate when it was something that they would have asked marketing for 5 years before. And so that was really the problem at the root of it, that I was saying no a lot because it didn't make sense in the new world order that I had established, but I hadn't communicated it effectively to other people so that they understood where their requests would come into play. And I think the other piece of it was just recognizing that any interaction between colleagues is kind of an opportunity for relationship building or relationship unbuilding, demolition, I guess. And I hadn't been seeing it that way. I was looking at speed. So people would come to me and ask for something and I'd cut them off halfway through. No, we can't help with that. No, that's not a thing. And I'm not educating them on what I'm doing. I'm not giving them any alternatives. I'm not even making them feel heard as a person. I'm making them feel like they are interrupting me in my magnificent plan to save the world, right? So some of it was just kind of coming to that recognition and realizing that how I was saying no was the bigger problem than the fact that I was saying no.
Yeah, my core need is to be heard, so that would have been challenging for me.
See, I'm from Jersey, so I'm trying to get to the point as fast as possible and keep it moving, you know?
I'm like an efficiency driven person, so I'm with Jen on this. Like, I don't have time for that, and we're just not going to do it. And I'm not going to waste time on telling you why, because I know why. And I just assume that you do as well, which is something that I've had to work on in my career as well, is like getting rid of that assumption that people know what I do and why I do it and what I don't do and why I don't do it. Even within marketing, like I get people who ask me about federal all the time, and I won't touch federal with like a 12,000 foot pole. It scares the heck out of me. I don't like federal. I've done it before. I've put together like 4 3-inch binders of USACE proposals, and I still have nightmares about that, which is why I won't touch them anymore. But people are like, you do proposals, so why don't you do SF330s? Like, So when you realized that you were, being difficult, or you were told you were being difficult because you were saying no. How did you handle that? Like, what did you do?
So the first thing I did while my boss was still sitting in my office is together we wrote on a Post-it note the word no, and then put like the no symbol drawn through it and stuck it to my monitor. And so that was our first solution, was could I avoid saying the word no? And this is where I need to be really clear for everyone listening. It didn't mean I couldn't say no to things. I just couldn't use the word NO. So I could still decline requests. I could still guide people in another direction, but trying to change that perception of me as a negative person would start by no not being like every word out of my mouth the way it apparently had been up until that point without me realizing it. So that was the first step, is how do I avoid saying no? And the second was at least letting people finish their sentence. That's something that I had to learn how to do. Again, where I grew up, cutting someone off was efficient. It wasn't rude, and I was recognizing that it was being perceived as hurtful across the region I was now working in. So making sure to let people finish their thoughts, they felt heard. I could even ask follow-up questions, right? Maybe I'm not really getting their request. Maybe I'm not really understanding. But sometimes people are still coming with stuff that I need to say no to because it either wasn't something that the marketing team helped with, or it wasn't on our radar, or they hadn't gone through the correct process to get to this point. There were places where I had to educate people. So that became my next big piece, was if I was turning down a request for some reason, helping them understand what the correct protocol is or the correct process, and kind of understanding why it's a no. One thing that comes to mind as an example is we recently changed our social media guidelines for what we post from our corporate profiles rather than people's personal profiles. So people would come to me and be like, here is, a picture of my dog wearing a VHB shirt. Can we put it on the company social? And, my answer right off the bat is no, we cannot. But now the answer was, that's really cool. What an interesting photo. Unfortunately, we've changed the guidelines, so this wouldn't be appropriate to post on the company social anymore, but I'm happy to help you draft a post for your personal social. And that became the other piece of how I say no without saying no, is giving them an alternative, making it really clear that it's not, no, I can't help you. It's, no, but here's what we could do instead. Is that something you'd want to do? And that goes back again to that relationship building piece. It's, I'm here to help in certain very specific, appropriate, cases. Like, you don't want me to come help you design a bridge. That is not a skill set I bring. But there are appropriate times for marketing to be helping with different things, and just giving more clarity on what those are so that people felt comfortable coming to me, feeling like it was a positive interaction to be working with marketing. But also, we still had to maintain our own boundaries, because if I just started saying yes to everything that came across our plate, we'd probably need a team of 30, and we'd be helping with all kinds of things, from just like random meeting scheduling for meetings that marketing has no actual role in, to, being the printer repair person. I sit next to the printer. A lot of people think, I guess I own the printer. I do not, but, just kind of recognizing how to decline those requests in a way where the person still feels heard and understood and has a game plan for how they can move forward.
It's the worst seat in the house, right next to the printer.
I was excited because I do use the printer more than anyone else, let's be honest. Marketing still does hard copy proposals, but at the same time, I'm not a printer specialist.
I learned so much sitting next to the printer because the tech couldn't always make it in time, and we had that proposal going out in 2 hours. So I can fix fusers and change things, and I can open those things up and just futz around with them now. Yeah. Which of course was not helpful when people figured that out. Oh, I have to print a report. I'm well, that's sure, because I'm the only one in the office who knows how to fix the printer. Yeah, inadvertent skill that bit me in the butt.
That's on the engineering side, right? Knowing Revit. I kind of started transitioning into leadership at about the time that was coming out, and I very consciously made a decision. I don't really want to learn this, because if I do, then I have to jump in and help. And I don't really want to do that. So I'm curious, since you are more direct, how do you feel when people tell you no?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'd say it depends. If it is something clear and I have misread a situation, or, they just can't say no, they can't say yes to me at this time, I accept it because I think of that directness, that I respect it in others. Of course, sometimes I am going to be the type who might argue back. Okay, well, you said you can't help me, but what if I push this deadline to Friday? Can you help me then? You know, like, what if we change things around? What if we go through this way or that way? Like, I guess the positive way to describe it would be collaborative, but the truth is like, I just want to figure out, so how do we get the thing done? And, you know, and if it is not you and you cannot help me, I'd rather know that in the first minute than find out 20 minutes into a conversation that I'm talking to the wrong person and now I've wasted 20 minutes. So like for me, I'd rather hear it up front.
I was curious because I was talking to somebody yesterday who's been told he needs to be more assertive. He's a very thoughtful, relational person, and that served him very well in building a team that works well together and taking care of their clients. And you know, so we were talking about the different personality types and how you really have to take that into consideration, right? There are people who are really direct. There are people who are very thoughtful, very relational, very social. So yeah, I was curious, since you seem more direct, how that, when it came back at you.
Yeah. And I'd say for someone in that situation, if you're not comfortable being assertive, if that's not your vibe, if that's not how you handle things, you can look at other ways that you can kind of guide people to the right answer, like create a process and then kind of make sure everyone's educated on the process. And then the process can almost say no for you. Like, because then it's just asking like, oh, did you complete our go, no go form before you sent me this RFP? And then they're like, oh, no, I didn't. Okay, well, I can't do anything until you do this. So it's not, no, I won't set up a go, no go. It's, you have one more piece of work to do before I can help you, you know, kind of educating them in that way. Or I have a friend who, when he's doing really focused work, like the last day of a deadline before a proposal, he puts up an out of office reply that is like, if this is not related to name of proposal, I'll help you tomorrow. You know, and that's a way where he doesn't have to have that confrontation of saying, no, I don't have time for this today. The computer can do it for him. So that could be another solution where it's like assertion without having to be the one doing the asserting.
Well, we were talking about at a certain point, you do need to be more assertive, right? Like if I've asked nicely, you know, we were likening it back to our kids, right? If I've asked nicely 2 or 3 times for you to do this and you're not doing it, I need to be more assertive because you're not hearing me.
Exactly.
But it's saying, you know, you're not hearing me and I would like you to do this versus being passive aggressive and trying to manipulate them into doing it.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. People are smart. They know when you're trying to trick them into doing something. And if they really don't want to do it, they might avoid it. If you have two more passive people trying to both dance around something, it could just linger for weeks and weeks, right? Whereas, you know, assertive people, you might have a clash where people are like, well, I'm not doing it either. But either way, I think it goes back to just that clarity of the request and the expectations of what are you asking them for and why are you asking for it? You know, and then that kind of helps people make their own decisions and understandings, taking away the kind of yes, no piece of it of just, what are we trying to do here? Why is it important?
Absolutely. I'm wondering if is there like a difference between when marketing says no and technical staff says no, and like the difference when it crosses over? Like if you ask technical staff to do something in marketing, their instinct is to say no because marketing is scary and that's not what they do. And like if you ask marketing, like, Jen, will you design a bridge for me? Like, are you going to gut instinct say no? But if it's like that gray area, do they say no in a more direct way, and are they allowed to get away with that? Whereas marketing has to kind of be that helpful alternative no?
I think for me as a marketer, my perspective is that it's a little easier for the technical staff to say no, but I think it's because their priorities are a little more clear. The client's needs comes first, everything else comes after, is kind of how their day-to-day is spent because of the goal of being billable, right? Billable utilization, whatever your firm calls it. Most of their time needs to be spent doing things that we can charge a client for so that our company can remain profitable. And so that makes it easy that you have kind of a black and white divide of client requests, everybody else. And for marketers, I think it's a lot less clear because most of what marketing is doing is non-billable. So what we're doing during the 9 to 5 or whatever your regular workday is non-billable. What we're doing in the evenings or on weekends, if a proposal's going overboard, is non-billable. And so it sometimes feels like we can't say no as easily because our priorities are a little less clear. And I think too with marketers, marketing is kind of a unique role within the AEC industry because there's almost a perceived lack of authority. I know when I started out, I'd be surprised to be sitting in a meeting and I'm the youngest person in the room and the only female. Like that was weird to me coming from another industry. And it made you feel like, okay, am I going to tell this room of men who could be my father, like, no, we're not doing it that way because that way doesn't make any sense. Like kind of that perceived power imbalance can also make it more difficult for marketers to feel the confidence to say no or to speak up. There's just that kind of perception that it's not their role. But that's why I like to encourage my team of marketers to realize that they are SMEs in their own right? Like you are the marketing subject matter expert and the technical person is the technical subject matter expert. You know different things, but you're both experts in what you know. So your voice is valid, your opinion's valid, your suggestions are as valid as anyone else's, and we're all colleagues working together. But that's also why that education piece is important, is sometimes the technical staff, they're saying, no, I have a client meeting. No, I can't review that draft by tonight. Then that's the point where the marketer needs to speak up from their area of expertise and say, okay, but I need the edits by noon tomorrow. Are we going to miss the deadline? Because we need to have an hour and a half to upload it into the portal. I know you think that the portal takes 30 seconds and a snap of my fingers to upload, but that's not what it takes, she says after spending an hour this morning trying to figure out some portal she'd never worked in before. But, it's that kind of logic of again, recognizing that you're both trying to do the best thing for the firm, right? Like if we don't win proposals, we don't have any billable work. That's how this works. So proposals are important. We need to think about them as such, and marketers need to recognize that sometimes it's just providing that clarity so that technical staff can then reorder their priorities. Oh, I didn't realize it was due today. Let me see if I can push the client deadline back an hour. Then they can kind of reorganize their world.
And that's where our inability to say no shows up, is with the client.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's all marketers should control the world. I know how hard the technical staff work. I get the emails at 12:17 a.m., when you've finally gotten around to QCing the document. And so from the marketers, sometimes it's respecting that as well, and just recognizing that the technical staff have things on their plate that you don't know about. For you, that proposal is the most important thing this week. And that's why you're pushing the deadlines and saying, this is how we got to get things done. But that PM might be working on 3 other proposals and an interview and also a project document that's got to be due on this day and an after hours public involvement meeting. It needs to be more of that conversation. One of the things I like to do when I'm leading a proposal is talk about the schedule in more detail, not just can you get it done by these days, but what else is on your calendar? Do you have any vacation? Do you have any big work deadlines that are going to get in the way of this that I can then work around? Because I'd rather know earlier than later, but that's a little different than saying no, just straight up proposal management tips. Here you go.
But I think the technical staff burns out too, because they're just as bad at saying no as the marketing staff can be, right? Or they have a hard time with it. And I think it does come down to expectations, right? And what the role is and what the priorities are, because I was sitting in a leadership meeting this last week and, it's we're leaders of the company. Should we be in this leadership meeting or should we be in client meetings? And it's okay, well, you can't lead the company if you're not in the meeting. And I get that there are client meetings too, but one of those has to take priority over the other. And is there somebody else who could go to the client meeting, right?
Exactly. So. Yeah, and that's thinking about those alternatives, right? It's not necessarily a no. It's, okay, no, I can't personally go, but who else could go? Who's going to provide at least some semblance of the expertise that I'm bringing? Who else can at least go to show a good face to the client and show that we're still invested in this project, even though my attention was pulled in a different direction, for sure.
No, or send an alternate to the leadership meeting, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
There's always an option, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
we just fail to see it when we're stuck in fear and don't want to say no because we are worried about what other people are going to think of us.
Yes. I do want to be conscious of time. So Jen, do you have any final thoughts on saying no for our listeners before we jump into burning questions?
Yeah, I'd say figure out the way to say no that feels authentic to you. Like we were saying earlier, some folks are more assertive, some are more passive, some feel comfortable saying, no, I'm not doing that. Some feel like they've got to say this whole long excuse of why they've set a boundary or why they've decided to say no. You've got to figure out what works for you. But again, just look at it from that perspective of how can I build a relationship with this person? How can I say no in a way that we're both going to achieve the goals that we have and we're both going to leave this conversation feeling positive about the interaction? And then figure out, how do you say no? How do you set that boundary?
And you don't need to have an excuse if you want to say
exactly.
no.
Yes.
Also very important, and something I think a lot of marketers struggle with. We have to have a reason to say no, but we don't. Still working on that one personally.
Now it's time for burning questions.
Okay, so our burning question today is probably one that's perfect for Jen. Our listener says, I am a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm, so my role mostly focuses on proposals, but also includes support tasks like creating brochures, managing conferences, designing banners, writing blog posts and newsletters.
Is that it?
That's it. That's all. I'm sure there's more, but they didn't list it all. Non-proposal tasks often get in the way of my proposal workload. And when my proposal load is full, but I still need to get to all of my other responsibilities, I start to feel overwhelmed. How do I manage my workload when it gets too demanding?
That is a great question. And I love that they started by saying I'm at a mid-sized firm, because I think a lot of what we've talked about so far has assumed that you have a large team that can help you, right? And at a more mid-sized firm or a small firm, it might be a marketing team of 1 or a marketing team of 3. You're not talking about 15 marketers who can jump in as their proposal workloads lighten. But I'd say the first thing to do is definitely talk to your supervisor. Whether it's another marketer who's your supervisor, whether it's somebody on the technical side, they're still the one giving you those assignments, and they need to be aware of what all is on your plate. I will say, as a manager, I sometimes forget what I assign people. And so then I'll call and be like, hey, can you take on da-da-da? And I need you to then say, well, you already gave me such and such due that same day. Do you want me to do both? And I will 9 times out of 10 backtrack and go, okay, I forgot that I gave you that, so I'm going to call somebody else on the team, So just make sure your manager first knows everything that's on your plate. And maybe it's like a 2-column list of proposals and their due dates, and then additional activities and their due dates, so that they get that feel for everything that's on the plate, and they can help you determine how to best prioritize, first of all. Because sometimes some of the stuff is in the nice to have category, right? Like, it would be nice if we design new banners for that conference, but maybe we could use the other old ones just to, save us some time this go around. So get that extra input on what the prioritization should be. And then if you don't get a lot of support, or you kind of get them being like, well, it's all important, good luck, start to prioritize it yourself. Proposal tasks in my mind always tend to come first, because they've got that deadline that we cannot miss, right? Like, if the banners get printed a day later, it's probably still fine. If the proposal gets printed a day later, it is not fine, and you have no chance of winning this project anymore, right? So those have to come first. But usually, in my experience, there are ebbs and flows. So thinking about how you could batch some of your activities for those lighter proposal times, maybe you write a whole bunch of blog posts one week, and they're not all going to be posted that week, but now you have blog post content for the next couple of weeks when the proposals are going to sneak back up on you again, or thinking about conferences. Can you come up with like a kit or a process or a form that somebody fills out so that it makes it easier on you to organize it, or you can kind of get people to self-organize, like, I feel like with a lot of conferences sponsorships, it's like, add the logo and everyone emails me for the logo, like it's not posted on our intranet site. So now I just have a reply where I send a link to the intranet site where they can download the logo, whereas I used to then go to the folder, download it myself, attach it to the email. So that's ended up saving me a little bit of time, and again, goes with that education mentality of you can help yourself with this request or that request. So I think that's another way to kind of find that balance of what can you do earlier, what can you do in advance, what can you batch. And then also finding that balance of managing your schedule and communicating any downstream impacts. Like, if I take on this extra assignment, it means this other assignment might push a day or two. Is that okay? You know what you can balance in a day, you know what you can accomplish. So just communicating that to your supervisor and helping them understand, like, I was going to do X, Y, and Z this week, but the deadline has pushed so much for this proposal that I'm only going to get to X. Is that okay? Do we need to pull in somebody else to help? But yeah, I think it can be overwhelming, and especially when you do feel like you're the only one and you've got all of these assignments on your plate. But that's where it's also important to just give yourself a little bit of grace. Like, you are not superhuman. You are a regular person with a regular person's capabilities, and that's okay. But it does mean that you might not get to everything on your to-do list every day. And so figuring out what are those items that can continue to move down the list.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because I was just having this conversation yesterday, and this person had a perception in their mind of what they should be able to do. And because that was their perception, they were really disappointed and frustrated with themselves and felt like they were failing. But they were the one who set that perception, right? Of this is what I should be able to do. So if they can reset that perception, we were talking about, so he was, challenged to balance family and work. And it's like, okay, if you didn't have a family and you worked all day, every day, other than when you sleep, could you get all your work done? And it was questionable. And it's like, okay, then how in the world with a family are you thinking you're going to get all your work done?
Yeah.
It's just not possible. So changing that perception can be big. And the other thing I would say, you mentioned, right, like, okay, if these things are really important and I go talk to somebody, at a certain point, I'm making a choice of, okay, I'm going to work a little extra to get these things done. That feels a lot different than I have to work to get these things done.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of just recognizing, like I made a comment to one of my employees last weekend, because I was like, okay, this was on a Friday, and I was like, and then I'm just going to QC this proposal tomorrow morning. And she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that you'd have to QC my proposal on a Saturday. And I was like, what? Because like, to me, I didn't see it that way. I saw it as, I can get this done in an hour if no one is interrupting me, which is what Saturday work means to me, uninterrupted focus time. And so I was like, this is my choice. This isn't VHB's expectations. This is something I want to do, because otherwise it would take me 8 hours to review it on Monday, because I have 7 hours of meetings and 400 emails coming in, So it's helping them understand too, that like, yes, exactly that sometimes you're choosing to do stuff because it helps with your sanity, but when you're no longer choosing it and it's every day is 12 to 14 hours, that's a whole different story.
Well, the other thing, and we didn't really talk about it here, but we heard you talk about it at CERC, right, is that making these adjustments takes time too. So we have to get that into our head, right? Like, I can't just flip a switch and expect everything to be different tomorrow. It's going to have to be a gradual progression towards where I eventually want it to be.
Yeah.
And that might help here too, right? Like, if they're on their own or in a very small group, setting the path can take some of the pressure off of, this is where we're going, but right now we're not there.
Yeah. And just acknowledging that for sure. Yes, it's especially the larger the firm you have, the longer it takes to institute new processes, new systems. It just takes a while to turn the boat. It's harder to turn a cruise ship than it is to turn a kayak, right? So kind of keeping through that mentality of like, it may take time to see the changes you want. And it's also going to change, like, as your job changes, as you go on. I used to be able to handle a to-do list that was like a Word document long in a day, right? Because I was just cranking on proposals, rocking and rolling down my to-do list. Now, if we had video, you would see me holding up a Post-it note. I can only do in one day what fits on this one tiny Post-it note. And I've found that out through trial and error, that if I've got more things on my to-do list than fit in that square, I'm not going to get them all done today. And so just recognizing that, and again, then recategorizing as stuff comes onto the list of what can keep pushing, what needs to go to tomorrow's Post-it note, which is a different color because that's how I operate.
I love it. She writes pretty small on that Post-it note too.
That's true. That's true. My method has been to, I have my master task list, which is probably a Word document or two long. But I've realized, because I normally function at like super high, I'm constantly cranking out a ton of things, and that's where I burn myself out. So I've slowly realized that like I shouldn't hold myself to that standard, even though I can do it, I shouldn't do it. And so I pick 3 things for the day. And if I get through those 3 things, I can call it a day. I've done good. And if I get through those 3 things in like 2 hours, then I just add 3 more things. And I do it that way so that I'm not killing myself.
And
I
if
think
you
for our
get to the
solo,
most important thing out of your 3 in one day, it was still a great day.
Yep.
yes, I have usually one big task and 2 small tasks, like outline this proposal and then send that important email that you forgot to send yesterday. And then, so if I get through the outline, life is great. But for my solo and like small team marketers, because that's where I've lived for most of my career, is the solo marketing. I think we get so used to holding ourselves to that. We're going 150 miles an hour constantly, and our firms are used to us doing that and handling everything, that it will take time for us to realize that we can take our foot off that gas pedal and still be going 80, and that's enough for now, and we'll just keep easing off of it until we get back down to a normal level, like you said, just pushing things that can be pushed so you can manage what you can manage humanly in a day. You don't have to be the superhuman, even if that's what you've been for the last 5 years or whatever it is. It's never too late to back down and educate on what is capable of being supported.
Yeah, be careful of that too, right? Because when you are superhuman, you get a lot of praise. And that can be really addictive, right? Of, wow, I'm amazing. We don't want to stop, because then nobody's going to tell us we're amazing anymore. And it's a trap that we fall into, because we do get so much validation for being so great. But if we give ourselves,
we'll tell you here, everybody who's listening right now is great. If you need some praise, you can email us. We'll give you all the praise you want. You don't need to work your fingers to the bone to get that. Any final thoughts on our burning question? I think we've answered it wonderfully.
For a little self-acknowledgement, right?
Yeah. See what I did there? We're amazing. Jen, thank you so much for bantering with us today. This has been amazing. You are wonderful. We're definitely going to have you back at some point, because this was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yay, I hope you figured out your portal. I know that those are stressful. I just fought with one yesterday, so that just hit me in the feels when you said that.
Oh yeah, we submitted with 4 hours to spare, because I told them I had 2 meetings, so we needed to do it before my meetings, one of which was this very podcast. So we did it.
Oh, yay.
It's trying to come back to this dark arts idea. You guys are talking about portals and...
That's it. Used to be printers, now it's portals. Marketing's changing, evolving every day.
Magic. A friendly reminder to our listeners, if you have burning questions, you can email them to us at burnoutbanter@gmail.com. And please remember to like or subscribe to the podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen, to make sure you never miss an episode.